Dr. Stanley Ridgley, welcome to The Truth.
Thanks so much, John. It's a pleasure to be here. I heard a lot about your show, and I'm eager to address you and your erudite audience about these issues of higher education.
Well, I really appreciate that. And for our listeners and viewers of our live stream, Dr. Ridgley is one smart guy. I hope I can hold a conversation with him because he has got a PhD from Duke, which is a wonderful school in the South, and an MBA from Temple, and he is currently a full professor of management at Drexel University in the city of brotherly love. So, Dr. Ridgley, thank you for coming on, and you have got a new book called DEI Exposed. What a compelling title that is.
Well, I think this topic is compelling, especially since I expose a big scam or a big con that's being perpetrated on Americans' higher education on our campuses. And I think that someone needed to expose these folks because the con was being swallowed, the swindle was being executed on our campuses, seemingly with impunity, seemingly with the complicity of our administrations, our folks who are raising lots and lots of revenue off of parents' tuition and paying bureaucrats, DEI bureaucrats, diversicrats as we like to call them, exorbitant salaries to train people to basically hate and hate each other and treat each other with undue hyper suspicion. I think it's a terrible thing that's been going on, and it's been going on for way too long.
Well, we had a, a very controversial period in Atlanta with our premier private school, K through 12, Westminster. And it was formed on Christian values. And then somewhere along the line, they lost their values, and it is now referred to as woke Minster. And my wife attended school there for 13 years, kindergarten through the 12th grade. Two of our three sons were Alpha Omegas at Westminster before it went woke. It used to be such a wonderful school, and then it just got infested with this liberal ideology. And the problem is that it costs a lot to send your children there, but then they take our money and use it for purposes that we had no intention that they use it for. But especially in higher education, you've got this thing called tenure. So it basically makes the professors untouchable, does it not?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think that we need to expand our understanding of who's propagating this nonsense on the campuses, that professors who have tenure pretty much want to do their research, do their teaching, and their service, especially those in the science fields, engineering, computer science, that kind of thing, mathematics. The real culprits of folks who are activists on the campuses are usually in the social sciences like sociology, political science, and liberal arts history, and that kind of thing. And of course, our bureaucrats in the system. And the bureaucrat presence on college campuses have been growing over the last 10 to 15 years to the extent that services are growing, counseling services, coordinators, people who are nurturing and fostering student success, they're all coming onto the college campuses as budgets swell. And what we find that one of these things is that tuition never goes down. It sometimes will be leveled out, but it will eventually increase, and that is because of these expenditures on superfluous bureaucracies. And one of those, if not the largest superfluous bureaucracy, is the DEI bureaucracy on college campuses nationwide. You mentioned that you find yourself paying for things that you never asked for, paying for services that you do not take advantage of, and even paying for the brainwashing of your kids against the traditional values, whether they be secular or religious, that you're basically paying for the subversion of your way of life. And I think that more and more parents are finding this out, more and more donors are finding this out, and they're beginning to leverage their influence on college campuses to where colleges and universities are going to have to respond by either modifying what they do or basically abandoning the idea that they can receive no strings attached dollars from both the federal government, from donors, and from parents.
When I went to college a very long time ago now, I was a political science major, and we had the entire spectrum covered in the
Mhm.
faculty. We had Dr. Fred Richardson, who was actually a friend of mine. We got along great. He was a very likable individual, but as far left as you could get. And so I just tolerated him, and we would talk about current events and politics, and we never got angry at each other. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we had Dr. Art Peterson, who was on the RNC platform committee when Richard Nixon was running for president. And we had perhaps more congenial conversations than me and Dr. Richardson, but it just seemed like miraculously everybody got along. And we tolerated other people's views, and we could have conversations about it, which I loved. I thought it was great. Now, there are friends of mine who I really like, who I refuse to engage in any kind of political discussion because I know where it's going to end up. The first thing they do is they get their little salvo in, and then I will start to respond, and they say, well, we shouldn't talk about this. It's not good for our relationship. So that's how convenient is that? You got your little dig in, but now you're not going to let me talk. Okay, I get it. Well, how did we lose our way? How did we get so to a place of such distortion?
Well, I think it's been a kind of a negligence on our part being the part of parents and donors, simply assuming that the universities would remain the same as they were when you and I went to college. Certainly, there's always been a liberal cant to what college, it's usually 6-1, liberal to conservative faculty. But the thing that really has changed is the bureaucracy, which has grown astronomically. It's like a cancer metastasizing in the academic politic. And we have now a disparity of 12-1 in the bureaucracy of liberals to conservatives, usually far left, when I say progressive, to conservatives. And this has had a deleterious impact on students, on how students learn, because these folks who are administrators believe themselves to be college educators. They consider themselves this. They use the opportunities in student-facing situations as advisors, residence hall managers, clerks, that sort of thing. Any student-facing opportunity they have, they will use it to propound a leftist ideology or different worldview. And this appears in their literature. They say, here's what we want to do, here's how we do it, and here's how well we're doing it. This is no secret if you actually read the literature, what they actually say to each other. Does not appear on a college or university website that this is what they're engaged in. But again, it's no secret, and if you take the time to read the material and become conversant with the organizations that support these groups of people. Off campus, it's the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education, 2,000 strong. There are two student personnel organizations. One's called ACPA and the NASPA. They are a total of about 20 to 22,000 strong. All of them ideologically motivated, all of them in positions of authority and influence on the college campuses. And they learn how to propagate this radical ideology on the campuses. And so this is what has happened over the past 15, 20 years. The colleges themselves have changed, have transformed from marketplace of ideas, we can exchange and talk and have these kinds of conversations that you talked about, John, to a basically crucibles of indoctrination, where we're going to present students with the received truth of this radical progressive ideology, and we're not going to permit any type of disagreement. Frederick Jameson was a famous Marxist theorist. He's in his twilight years now. He said when I was at Duke University, he said this: the purpose of the university is to train student cadres for the struggles of the future. The struggles, of course, being class warfare, being a Marxist struggle, him being a Marxist. And that's how he viewed his role on the college campus, not exposing students to the Matthew Arnold's notion of the best that has been thought and said, and to perhaps convey that to subsequent generations, but rather to train students in a received truth of Marxism in his case. And that's what we're seeing right now, that the idea that we're going to train people to be critical thinkers, well, no, we're not going to train you to do that. We're going to train you to accept what we tell you is the truth and proceed from that. Proceed from that. And that's been a big problem that in the university, they even have a name for this. It's called transformative education. And you have one of these personnel management organizations called ACPA. Their motto is boldly transforming higher education. This is a student personnel group. It's not a group of faculty. These are people who are utilizing their positions in student-facing positions to boldly transform the university in a transformative process that is moving farther and farther left.
So how do you survive at Drexel University as one out of 12 conservatives, if those numbers hold true at Drexel? But what's life like for you on campus there?
Oh, I'm heavily embedded in the university hierarchy in the sense that I don't boycott these training sessions that a lot of people that are offered, these DEI training sessions. So I go to everyone I possibly can. I think it's important to understand what the enemy is saying and doing, and who they're doing it to.
Do you speak up?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, I can. I think it's important to understand.
No. I don't mean here. I mean in those meetings. Do you speak out?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm happy to. No, my wife will tell you she can't shut me up. I'm more than happy to speak up and to point out the inconsistencies. But I will tell you that a lot of the material that they offer in these, when I'm present, the material is bowdlerized and carefully crafted so that certain topics are not broached and certain languages not used. How can I possibly know that? Well, I have lots of friends who go through these same programs, and I describe what I experience, and they describe what they experience, and it's significantly different. And so I think that they curtail their frankness, their candor when I'm around. I don't have any problem with these folks on the campus. I deal with a lot of smart people in the sciences, technology, engineering, and math fields, in business, economics, and for the most part, these folks are pretty spot on. There is a small contingent of progressives, of radicals that come out of this what I call the soft side of campus: sociology, history, political science, that kind of thing, and certainly English, if you can believe that. The English radicals, English teaching radicals, they rarely stick to the script that they're supposed to be sticking to. They utilize their classes as bully pulpits for radical transformation of the students. Those people are they have influence far beyond the numbers on the campuses. The other folks that make up the 12 to 1 percentage, they're in the bureaucracy, and they avoid me, I will have to say, for the most part. And so I survive. I won't even call it survival. I thrive. And you see my studio set up here with my DEI Exposed. I conduct all my meetings in my office with this type of scenario here, basically propounding what I believe to be the truth, that is substantially documented. And if anyone wants to comment on that, they can engage me. I'm happy to do so, but they rarely do. And that's one of the big problems with DEI on the campus. They rarely engage.
So this is probably not going to come out exactly right, but I'm as we're talking, I'm reflecting back on a conversation I had some 20 years ago with my wife after our children left to go off to college. My wife, now of 47 years, who I love and adore, came and went to work with me at our company every day. And I needed help, and I welcomed her into the company. And I remember that when we were reviewing our company insurance plan, she was all about giving the employees all the benefits, all the coverages that were available. And I interrupted the meeting and I said, well, sweetheart, you understand that somebody's got to pay for that. And this look of bewilderment came over her face, and she was like, couldn't believe that these benefits didn't just float down from the sky somehow. So my point is, I just wonder if there is a certain naivete among your colleagues who espouse these Marxist, socialist, communist beliefs. Is it possible they just don't understand the laws of nature and the laws of man and how the world spins? Is there a fantasy world on college campuses?
I have to agree with you on that. My own daughter, when she got her first job at the library, I can't remember her age at the time. I think it might have been 12, 11, 13, something like that. And she was so proud of her first paycheck. And she opened it up and said, "Hey, this is not all here. I'm supposed to make this amount of money." I said, "What happened to the rest of the money?" I said, "Welcome to the world of paying taxes."
And
All
so
the programs.
she went back and changed her registration as a Democrat to Republican.
Yeah, well, she's a young lady, and had thought that all these great things that you had just mentioned kind of fell from the trees. It's a world of scarce resources that business people understand we live in, and you have to make trade-offs, and you can't have everything that you want in unlimited quantities. If we could, well, we wouldn't even have the science of economics, because we don't have to economize. We can simply do what we want, as much as we want, for as long as we want. That's a world that I think a lot of academics dwell in, and they don't exit this world and do have a real job or have to deal with real people with real challenges. They stay on the campuses almost their entire working lives. A lot of them moving directly from undergraduate to graduate work, and then on into their time on the campus as a professoriate. In the professoriate, no, they do not have a real grasp on the challenges that real people have to deal with. They're not close to the ground. They're 5, 6, 15 times removed from where people work on the assembly line, where people work as garbage collectors, like me, work as garbage collectors, will work on the assembly line on a midnight shift, work in tobacco fields, as I did. And you have an idea that, well, we work for what we get, a full day's pay for a full day of work, and that you simply can't snap your fingers and say, well, we'd like to have all of this. We'd like to have fiddlers on every corner. We'd like to have a full lunch for every person. And we're simply going to make that happen. It's just going to happen.
Well, who could oppose that? I mean,
Right.
diversity, equity, and inclusion. Who can argue with that? I mean, those are very noble ideals to me. I'm for diversity. I don't want to discriminate or see anyone suffer because of the color of their skin or their background. And I'd like the world to be equally good for every living human. And I'm happy to invite anybody from any political, ethnic, sexual persuasion to come into my home and have a beer. The fact of the matter is, I think where it gets off the rails is that gets morphed into you've worked, you've saved, you've invested, you've become successful, and I want what you've got. And that's fundamentally unfair.
Well, that's always been at core, that's always been the animating principle behind Marxism. The idea that from each according to his ability to each according to his need. But what you just identified is the real problem with DEI, and that is a misapprehension of what it actually consists of. Yeah. I've had hate mail telling me that I don't understand DEI, that I'm ignorant. I just don't understand when I understand it probably better than they do. I am probably more profoundly read in the field of critical race theory and DEI than any of the proponents here on this college campus. You can go to my book, DEI Exposed, see the 600 footnotes, read the 450 pages of people in the DEI field saying what they believe. And I will tell you, it falls on deaf ears. The reason is, as you correctly note, I think, that people have been left to define DEI as they see fit because the words sound noble. They sound commonsensical. They sound very enlightened. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's an empty decanter into which people pour their own good intentions, their own good feelings. And that is what they want to talk about, not what DEI actually is and the remedy that supposedly exists on the college campus, which is grounded in an awful lie. It's grounded in the big con from which they swindle lots of money out of the universities. What's that con? The con game or the con story is that America is a racist country riven with white supremacy culture, that all whites are racist, are villains, are oppressors, are exploiters, and that all persons of color, as the situation demands, of course, all persons of color are victims, are exploited, are oppressed, are good. And the con game that has been running on the campuses is that it's called virtuous victimhood. The idea that people who we identify as victims by virtue of their skin color or their class are virtuous and they cannot be criticized. This is part of the whole notion of virtuous victimhood. And the idea we're going to find people on the campuses who are villains, and we're going to designate those villains, and it makes it very easy to identify villains and victims simply by looking at who they are. And they being the DEI cadres, they ignore the individual circumstances of a person's background. The person who is poor from Appalachia is the same as a person who went to private school in New York, say.
So
Both of them are oppressors.
you raise a topic that I've done an incredible amount of thinking on, and I've got a charity in Atlanta called the Friends of English Avenue. It encompasses a 60 square block of Atlanta that has every social ill that you could possibly imagine present there. Homelessness, joblessness, illiteracy, disease, the heaviest concentration of HIV in the country per capita in that 60 square block area, crime, violence, drugs openly marketed on the street corner. And I've spent 12, 15 years working in that neighborhood. And invariably on my way home from there, I consciously think about only by the grace of God, there go I. And, life is not fair. And so I wonder, what role does God have in all of this? I didn't choose my parents or my circumstances no more than those folks did. And it is troubling to me that people have drawn a unfair card in life. But these are the laws of nature. These are not the laws of man. And so I would say, blame God for your condition. But God also gives you 2 arms, 2 legs, a brain, the ability to reason, and the ability to work your way out of your condition. So where do you see this philosophical?
Well, philosophically, I like to go back to, and this is a person who greatly influences the classes that I teach. I teach entrepreneurship, strategy, technology, innovation, management. At the core level, the idea that the individual can reach out and can greatly impact his or her fate. And Frederick Douglass is a great inspiration. And his most famous speech, his most, delivered speech is called Self-Made Men. Today, I suppose he would call it self-made people. But at the time, I think he first delivered the speech prior to the Civil War, 1858, and delivered that speech probably thousands of times over his long and illustrious career. And the idea that you can transform your own life through living the good life, living a good, say, Christian life, living a good life whether you are a Christian or not, living a good life thinking of others and recognizing that we not only are the masters of our own fate, that would be too much of an expression, I think, but we can influence our fate. We can reach out, and through hard work. He said this, the magic formula is work, 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 work. He said this 4 times with additional exclamation points each time. This comes out of his speech, and I really commend that to anyone who would understand a person born into bad circumstances, who ran away, I think, at age 12 or 13 from slavery, who lifted himself up, who transformed his own life through public speaking, through teaching himself to read, through basically self-effort to become one of this country's great iconic figures in civil rights, but also as an orator and a great beacon of freedom and a great beacon of what those of us can achieve in the American dream, right here in the United States, with a whole host of opportunities available to you, and all you have to do is reach out and take them. But it requires sweat equity, and Frederick Douglass recognizes better than most.
I could not agree with what you said more, or what Frederick Douglass said that you've repeated. It gives me a notion that maybe we should coin a new phrase: "Don't woke work."
Well, that has a certain rhyme to it, certainly alliterative, and don't woke work. That's I can't disagree with that. I think work is greatly undervalued. The idea that you can achieve great things. I think it was Thomas Edison who said had the very famous quote that a lot of people miss opportunity when it knocks because it comes dressed in overalls and looks a lot like work.
Yeah, and I was lucky to have a dad and a good role model and a mom who loved me. And my dad grew up on a farm. To this day, I'm no good in sports. I try and I work hard at it. I didn't acquire those skills as a little boy. Instead, but I did acquire the skill of work. He
Yeah,
grew up on the farm and he was expected to come home and do the chores. Well, I didn't grow up on a farm, but I damn sure did the chores when I came home if I
yeah.
wanted to eat dinner and have any privileges. It seems to be a value that we may have lost in our society today.
I think that a lot of the modern ethos, especially being propounded in on the campuses with regard to DEI, with regard to other social justice types of activities, the devaluation of the individual. I will tell you that one of the quote unquote white supremacy culture behaviors that's identified and actually propounded on the campuses, this is a white supremacy culture, is individualism. And so you have it being denigrated, this success behavior, this idea that I can do things, I can do great things, is being denigrated in favor of a kind of a collectivist view. It's also being denigrated by saying, you know what, I'm going to blame someone else for my fate, for my station in life. I'm going to externalize my blame. I'm going to blame the world for not recognizing my genius, not recognizing my generosity of spirit, not valuing me enough. And I really treat this at length in DEI Exposed to explain and expose the mindset of the people who have internalized a really bizarre ideology and a really bizarre look of view on life. It's very paranoid in its expression.
Well, you've touched on a number of things that I can identify with. I had a conversation with Charlie Kirk on The Truth a couple of months ago, and we both feel that this notion of racist, sexist, misogynist, globalist, nationalist, federalist, all the terms that people use to denigrate people that don't agree with them have just really turned out to be a big manipulation, and it's designed to get us to fall in line. Because who wants to be identified as a racist or a sexist or a misogynist? I mean, these are horrible
Yep.
labels to have attached to an individual, and so people withdraw from a
Right.
healthy discussion for fear. I think you agree?
You cannot have a healthy discussion with these folks, certainly the EEI folks. And I talk about this con, I mentioned at the very beginning, the con game of virtuous victimhood. And this has been generated as some of the traits that you just mentioned. There is a malevolent series of psychological characteristics that go along with the DEI swindle. And they're called the dark triad of psychological traits, which incorporates narcissism, Machiavellian manipulation, and of course psychopathy or lack of empathy for other people. And it's called the dark triad of psychology traits. And I think that this really exemplifies the virtuous victimhood activity that is engaged on the college campuses right now. Anywhere you have a DEI office that is training students into a divisive ideology, that is encouraging students to report on each other via snitch lines. If you feel like you've been the victim of a racial microaggression or something like that, you can anonymously report that, and a bias response team will be summoned and investigate the issue. There's an awful lot of hyper suspicion, distrust, and I should say the characteristics of paranoid personality disorder that's being generated on the campus to create the problem that DEI folks were supposedly hired to solve. It's a beautiful business model if you're really into receiving your paycheck based on that.
As we're talking through these things, it just strikes me that one of the characteristics or part of the DEI culture is a culture of dishonesty, because truth has very little place in the conversation, it seems to
Right.
me.
Well, you're exactly right, and I'm so glad that you said that, because in my book I point out a number of times there is no truth is not a defense against the depredations or the predations of DEI. It doesn't matter for these folks. The truth does not matter. There are many truths. There are many knowledges, and here is how they look at it. If, and this is something that really applies to the phenomenon of the hate crime hoax on campus, where people say plant a noose on the campus to generate a lot of publicity for this particular, oh, it's racist, only to discover that the person put the noose there themselves. And there's a book by Wilfred Riley that says that either up to 30 to 50% of these so-called hate crimes are forgeries or fakes. They're fakery. It's just a fakery writ large.
Well, we're seeing that play out in real time right now with these terroristic acts against Tesla dealerships and against Elon Musk. And then you peel the layers back and you find out that these protesters are actually paid to be there and that they're organizations that are funding them.
It's like theater. It's contrived. It's performative, as the left likes to say. It's not a genuine grassroots organic movement. But the point being is that it doesn't matter if it's true or not. What matters is it could be true. And that's a quote from a proponent of DEI. It doesn't matter whether the hate crime was true or not. What matters that we live in a society where it could be true. Now, chew on that for a moment and ask yourself, does that sound like something that we should be teaching college kids, that the truth doesn't matter? What matters is this depredation could be true.
Well, and that's where I'm coming from in this whole conversation, is that that's an awfully slippery slope that they are creating. And it seems to me, and the same problem with limiting people's freedom of speech, you know, it's one thing to drive your own beliefs into the conversation to the exclusion of others, and you cancel people and you limit their ability to speak. It seems to me that a natural consequence is it's going to come back to bite you. If you don't it's almost like saying that oxygen is necessary for life, but I'm going to limit other people's oxygen because I don't like them. I'm going to limit their speech because I don't like what they're saying. But if you do that, that deprives the culture, the society, of a fundamental element of freedom, and that is freedom of speech. So don't they have the ability to look one or two moves down the chessboard and see that those are really dangerous ideas that are going to come back to harm everybody, including the people that are advocating that?
I think so. I think that one of the things you mentioned earlier, the demonstrations at Columbia University and the arrest of Mahmoud Khalil for supposedly speaking out in ways that the federal government didn't like. And that's supposedly the reason the young man was arrested. When of course it's not. He was arrested for, in my view, violating RICO statutes against organized crime, basically acting as the lead for an organization, Students for Justice in Palestine, that's organizing systematic threats, intimidation, assaults, trespass on the campuses, vandalism on the campus in support of a terrorist organization, passing out the terrorist organization's literature. That and that's not free speech. That's violent. Those are crimes. There's also crimes against, or I should say, violations of the regulations and rules of the university itself. But when you set up an environment, say at Columbia, where violations are unpunished, then the rules make no difference. You can do anything that you want to, and all you'll get is a finger wag and say, well, you shouldn't be doing this. There's no incentive to not do these things at all. And so you find a small ethnic minority being bullied, being intimidated, being assaulted, and being prohibited from going to certain parts of campus, which, quite frankly, is illegal. It's an example of illegal discrimination that the university is sanctioning, approving of. And so this is an example of using, quote, free speech as a fig leaf for a lot of other activities that are basically against the law, that are crimes.
Dr. Stanley Ridgley, he is a PhD, teaches at Drexel University, author of DEI Exposed. Dr. Ridgley, have you ever in your career seen a more dramatic change of an entire nation's perspective on political issues that we've witnessed in the last 45 days. I mean, in December, DEI was fashionable. It was what every company had on its website. And today, it is on the run. Companies have removed it from their websites. They've fired their DEI officers, and they're saying that we're going to return to traditional values like telling the truth. I've never witnessed anything like it in my life. Have you?
No, I haven't. It's phenomenal. It's refreshing. It's something I never thought I would see. I saw something similar upon the assumption of office by Joe Biden with the signing of his 78 executive orders that was basically transforming the United States into an unrecognizable funhouse mirror of itself, basically stripping the country of its protections and basic physical security protections, and basically elevating a lot of bizarre principles to the status of commonplace. And I never thought that I was hopeful that we would see a recoiling from this type of bizarre embrace of the abnormal, a bizarre embrace of an alien ideology that seemed so anti-American as to be hard to believe. And here we have the days since January 20th of this year. It's been phenomenal. Not all of this has been well received. That's to be expected. But I will say that the vast majority of American people are delighted, just as you are delighted, just as I am delighted, that and in stark disbelief that this wonderful cascade of actions of restoring American greatness, restoring American security, restoring education, restoring our society, restoring our economy to its rightful place in the world, kind of a celebration of American strength. I almost imagine it was very much like when Teddy Roosevelt was president, and he had that policy of, speak softly but carry a big stick. And he sent America. He didn't like the idea that America was not being respected, so he sent America's Navy on around the world, sailing expedition to stop by ports to display American power and to say, you know what, no. You need to respect the United States and our role in the world, and I think we're seeing a lot more of that today. I'm absolutely ecstatic, and certainly there are some sourpusses who want to see us weak. There's some sourpusses who view America as somehow this racist country. But I invite those folks to leave to a place that they find is better and is a better match to their proclivities.
So you were a former military intelligence officer,
Yes.
and which I think gives you unique qualifications to talk on this. Are you concerned about the deep state in America and permanent Washington and our intelligence community that seems to be behind a lot of things that are very bad that have occurred in our country in the last 60 years?
I think that we shouldn't give our intelligence agencies a pass. Certainly not. I think we've seen this kind of thing before. The idea that the FBI is spotless, or the CIA is spotless, is absurd. We saw what happened to the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover. We saw he basically transformed the FBI into a weapon of his personal vendetta. He actually ran the FBI like his own personal police force. And he did this by virtue of the fact that he was the only director of the FBI that we had. He knew all the secrets in Washington. And it's an example of what can happen when an organization like the FBI, which is a secretive organization quite by necessity, has its own power centers developing over time. And I think Kash Patel is going to do a great job as an outsider coming in and unearthing these types of power centers, breaking them up, and returning the FBI to its position as an esteemed law enforcement organization. Same with the NSA, the National Security Agency, the CIA is going to develop a culture. It's going to develop, because of its protective nature of its secrecy, is going to naturally, and I'm saying this not with any particular knowledge of it, naturally exceed the mandate, naturally exceed the boundaries of what it ought to be doing. And I think that every now and then a house cleaning is necessary to return our agencies to the control of the people and their
Well,
elected.
I like what you said about Kash Patel, and I share your enthusiasm with an asterisk. I am disappointed right now. After 45 days, we were promised that we would get the JFK files, the RFK, the MLK files, and the Epstein files. Pam Bondi had the files on her desk and was going to release them on Tuesday. Then, oh no, they didn't deliver all of the documents. Well, that's a crock because the documents aren't really documents. They're documents on a server somewhere. She says in the Southern District of New York. I can't imagine that the Attorney General of the United States can't log onto her computer and look at every document that is on any FBI server in the United States or the world for that matter. And that's where the documents reside. What's going on? Why have we not gotten the documents, the electronic files, the evidence released to us like Kash Patel said would be done on day one, like Donald Trump told us was going to happen, like Pam Bondi said they were going to have them on Tuesday about 3 weeks ago by my count?
I have no idea because I have no connection to that. I can speculate just as a lot of other people speculate. I'm speculating that perhaps there's other information involved in the documents, as you said, the documents that prohibit their release until they've been scrubbed, et cetera, et cetera. But I can also suggest that Epstein was probably involved, and it's pure speculation, and I give that caveat. He might well have been in the employ of certain of our intelligence agencies, given his access to a lot of important people, might have been on someone's payroll. Again, it's just pure speculation of what might be.
Well, it's not pure speculation because the rumors abound. And we look at what happened in West Palm Beach when Epstein was prosecuted for child trafficking. They went easy on him. They went light on him. And when the then current district attorney went to Washington for a confirmation hearing, he was point blank asked, why'd you go easy on Epstein? And he said, I was told to by the CIA. Hello? Now, that's not speculation. That's on the record. And we have reasons for believing these things. So I've been a student of JFK's assassination since I was home with the flu as a 10-year-old in the fourth grade. And I watched from the first news flash to the John saluting the horse-drawn carriage going down Pennsylvania Avenue. And I've studied it ever since. I've concluded based on books that I've read by Roger Stone, by David Talbot, by Douglas, the Unspeakable, and Mark Lane, that I really came to the conclusion that the CIA killed Kennedy and that Warren Dulles planned it, executed it with the encouragement of LBJ, and Hoover covered it up. Now, I'm starting to question that because that has been circulated in the public domain so much that I think most of the people in America would probably say they believe that. So what is it that they are hiding? And I'm beginning to wonder if it is not that at least in Epstein's case, may be traceable back to some of our allies, Israel, who's rumored to have had Epstein as a double agent for their country. Now, that would be pretty hard for the American people to swallow right now, I think.
Well, again, I can't really speculate. I'm not a student of these issues. My focus is on DEI on the campuses, and my previous book was on the campus, and so and I try to stay away from commenting on issues. I stay out of trouble by commenting on issues because there's always someone out there who is more learned, who is more researched, who knows these issues. I don't talk about healthcare. I don't talk about the actual Middle East. I don't talk about that. I basically keep my own counsel on that sort of thing. And I listen to what other people have to say, and I try to build up a reservoir of knowledge on those issues. Now, on DEI, on higher education, on certain geopolitical issues vis-a-vis Ukraine and Russia, I have certain opinions that I think have been leavened by my experience and by the fact that I do speak Russian and that I've been to Russia 20 times, that I studied at the Lomonosov University or the Moscow State University in the summer of 2005. I have many Russian friends. I've lectured in Russia, but I've also taught in Colombia. I've taught in Singapore. I've taught in communist China and in India for 10 years. And so all of those experiences give me a certain perspective. I get different chops at the diamond like facet. And so all of that I try to incorporate in my expression of my opinions on these topics. But I can't speak to those issues that you've raised just now with
Well,
regard.
and I respect that, and I appreciate your candor. I certainly understand where you're coming from. The only reason that I'm so passionate about it is that I believe that the world used to look to the United States as the moral authority, and it
Right.
concerns me that we've lost that high ground, and I don't think we'll ever regain it until all the secrets are told. We hold the people accountable. I'm sorry, if LBJ had a role in it, we got to rip his name off the buildings and take the street signs down. J. Edgar Hoover doesn't have any right to have the FBI headquarters named after him if it is in fact true that he had a hand in this. I think it's the worst thing that's ever happened in America. I think it was the day that we lost our innocence. And I remember watching Ed Sullivan and Lassie and Dennis DeMenace and on television as a youngster, and I walked down the sidewalk with my dog Spot from North Main Street to South Main Street to visit my grandparents, and there were no children on milk cartons. I yearn for the return and get back to those days, and it may just be my fantasy that we will do it, but we're going to keep working and plotting to do that because we live in the greatest country on earth, and I want to keep
Yeah.
it that way. And I know
I'm
you
sure
do
you
too.
probably remembered, on Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color, and Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom is part of that whole
Well, we
American.
watched Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color on our lone family black and white TV with rabbit ears. So I have dated myself.
Well, that's when Disney wasn't a bad word. I
That's
think.
exactly right. Dr.
Apple.
Ridgley, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And I hope you'll come back on. And author of the book, DEI Exposed. And I think it has been an enlightening, fascinating conversation. And I appreciate your contributions to making this world and our country a better place to live. You've certainly highlighted an important topic.
I do appreciate being on your show and having this wonderful conversation. I want to encourage your viewers to check out DEI Exposed on Amazon.com. That would be the favorite place to go for a number of reasons. But here it is, just to show you, it actually is a real book. I'm reading it again myself to refresh my interest and knowledge on these issues. Thank you so
Well,
much.
I'm going to order it and I'm going to read it. And when we meet in person, I'm going to ask you to autograph it for me. And so I look forward to both reading the book and meeting you in person someday. Thank you again for coming on The Truth. Come back soon.